Well, it's time now for business, and for that I'm joined in the studio by Stephen Carroll. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Haxie.
You've been looking at the economic cost of the measures announced by the French president on Wednesday night.
That's right. The French Finance Ministry says that a month of closing schools and non-essential shops will cost the state 11 billion euros. That's as government aid programmes will be extended to businesses that are closed, and parents that can't work remotely will be given access to the government furlough scheme, which pays around 85% of their net salaries. The dip in economic activity is expected to be less than the first lockdown last spring, but greater than the lockdown in November when schools remained open. Ellen Gainsford has more.
In a bid to slow the spread of the virus, the French government is once again toughening lockdown restrictions. But how will it affect the economy? 150,000 businesses across France are set to temporarily close at an estimated cost of 11 billion euros a month, and schools that are shut for 3 weeks nationwide. A previous estimate from the French Finance Ministry put the combined effects of schools and non-essential businesses shutting at an 18% knock to economic activity, less extreme than the effects of the first lockdown last year, which caused a 30% drop.
Bien évidemment, ça a un impact toujours sur l'emploi des parents, et c'est pour ça que l'éducation nationale fait tout pour ne pas fermer les écoles. Mais je pense que l'impact sera plus limité, notamment par rapport au premier confinement. Pourquoi ? Parce qu'il y a plus de possibilités de garde et toutes les entreprises qui ne sont pas en télétravail beaucoup moins que lors du premier confinement.
Many businesses have been bracing for the closures, preparing for employees to work from home and require more flexibility for childcare.
Ils veulent continuer un peu à travailler, donc on leur dira oui et on aménage les horaires de travail. Ça peut être le matin, ça peut être l'après-midi, ça va être l'heure des siestes en fonction de l'âge de l'enfant.
The French government has said that parents who can't work from home will be eligible for furlough payments. Meanwhile, measures including grants to the self-employed and small businesses will continue to be extended.
Next, even to that massive infrastructure investment plan announced by US President Joe Biden. How is that going to be paid for?
Well, the $2.3 trillion plan includes money for fixing roads, expanding broadband access and funding research and development of greener modes of transport. Joe Biden described it as a once-in-a-generation investment in America. He wants to pay for that primarily through increasing the tax on companies. Now, there are two main changes on the table in the plan. One is that the top rate of corporate tax would increase. Under Donald Trump's tax cuts passed in 2017, that came down from 35% to 21%. Joe Biden wants it to go back up to 28%. The president also wants to increase the minimum tax that American companies pay on their profits made abroad. The current floor on those profits is a rate of 10.5%. This proposal would see that doubled to 21%. Now, that's important outside of the United States for two reasons. One, it could influence how US companies operate abroad. And two, it might help efforts to reform taxation of things like big digital companies. That's been under negotiation at the OECD for years now. A key part of that plan is to ensure that companies pay a minimum rate of tax and don't shift their profits around to avoid paying taxes. This plan might help.
So how's all of this being absorbed by the market?
Investors like spending plans like the one announced by Joe Biden yesterday. So that's one of the factors that's contributing to rises on Asian shares today. If we look at what's been happening across the Asian markets, we can also see that good economic data in South Korea and Japan also helping to create some optimism for investors. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong, they're up by over 1%.
Now, Johnson & Johnson says it will still be able to meet its vaccine production targets after a batch of its shots was ruined at one of its supplier plants.
According to the New York Times, the problem arose at a plant in Baltimore where workers accidentally mixed up ingredients in the COVID-19 vaccine. The mistake was identified in the manufacturing process, so none of the affected doses actually left the factory. But according to reports, 15 million doses were affected. Johnson & Johnson says that it's still, however, on track to deliver 100 million doses in the US by the end of June.
And finally from you, Stephen, some major companies have been speaking out against a recent change to voting laws in the US.
Yeah, that's right. Two of the biggest companies in the state of Georgia, that's Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines, have come out strongly against a reform of voting law passed in Georgia last week. The law introduces stricter ID requirements for voters and limits the use of drop boxes for ballots. Campaigners say the measures will mostly impact black voters. The chief executive of Delta Airlines described the changes as unacceptable and contrary to Delta's values. He said that he would work with state officials to amend the law. Coke's boss made a similar statement. Both companies had come under pressure from the Black Voters Matter campaign to speak out against these changes. Of course, they chose to do so after the law had been passed.
Stephen Carroll, with a look through the day's top business stories. Thank you very much.